The sky above the small moon was a deep shade of blue, turning darker as evening approached. Tom sat on a crate beside his damaged cargo ship, checking the cracks on one of the engine panels. The meteor storm from the night before had been sudden and brutal. Shards of rock had slammed into the hull, and though he managed to land safely, the ship would not fly again until he replaced several key parts. The moon seemed quiet when he first landed. The ground was covered with thick grass that gave off a faint silver glow under the sun. In the distance, jagged cliffs stood like walls, and beyond them lay a dense forest that seemed almost too still. Tom worked quickly, but every few minutes he looked toward the forest. Something about it made him uneasy. The leaves barely moved even when the wind passed. The shadows beneath the trees felt heavier than they should. As he checked his tools, a sound reached his ears. It was soft, like the snap of a thin branch under weight. He froze and looked toward the forest again. His eyes scanned the edge, but he saw nothing. Deciding it was probably a small animal, he went back to his work. Minutes later, another sound came, this time closer. Tom turned his head. Sharply, the grass swayed and a shape emerged from the shadows. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall, graceful, and strong, her skin shimmered faintly like metal in the sunlight, catching both gold and silver tones. She wore armor made of overlapping plates that looked both ancient and practical. Her hair was braided tightly and reached down to her shoulders. In one hand, she held a spear with a wide, curved blade that glinted sharply. Tom's first thought was that she might be dangerous. He stood slowly, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture for peace. The alien woman stopped a short distance away, her sharp eyes studying him with a focus that felt heavy. They stood in silence for several seconds. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of the forest toward him, earthy and strange. She tilted, her head slightly, then stepped forward. "I mean no harm," Tom said slowly, unsure if she could understand his words. She didn't respond in speech, but her expression shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and she made a short clicking sound with her tongue. She circled him once, keeping her spear low but ready. Tom realized she was inspecting him. Every move she made was precise, like a hunter assessing unfamiliar prey, or a threat. Finally, she stopped in front of him and spoke in a voice that was calm, yet firm. Her language was unfamiliar, the words smooth but layered with sounds he could not place. She pointed to him, then toward the forest, then tapped her own chest. He frowned, trying to guess her meaning. "You live here?" he asked, pointing toward the forest. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened slightly. Then she tapped the ground near his ship and made another gesture, as if telling him to stay put. Tom decided to try another approach. He picked up a small piece of metal from his repair kit and showed her, pointing to the damaged ship. "I need to fix it," he said, miming the act of repairing. She watched his movements carefully. After a pause, she gave a short nod as if she understood enough. The silence between them was tense, but not hostile. Tom could feel her presence like a weight. She was not here by accident. She had chosen to reveal herself, which meant she had likely been watching him for some time. A distant sound broke the stillness, a howl, low and drawn out. Tom felt the hair on his arms rise. The alien woman's head turned sharply toward the forest. Her grip on the spear tightened. Tom took a step toward his ship, glancing at her for permission. She held up her hand, signaling him to wait. Then, with smooth movements, she walked toward the tree line, scanning the shadows. After a moment, she returned and spoke quickly in her language. Though he couldn't understand her words, her tone made the meaning clear. There was danger nearby. She stepped closer to him, and for the first time, Tom noticed the way her gaze shifted past him to the surrounding area as if checking for more threats. She was not just watching him, she was making sure nothing else approached. Tom wondered why. She didn't know him, and he had nothing to offer her, but she stayed close, her presence almost protective. Finally, she pointed to the forest again, then back to him, and repeated her earlier gesture of tapping her chest. Her eyes met his, steady and unblinking. Tom didn't know exactly what she meant, but a strange feeling settled in his chest. Somehow he had the sense that she was claiming responsibility for him, at least for now. As the sun began to set, the shadows lengthened, and the strange, glowing grass took on a pale blue hue. The air cooled quickly. Tom knew the night would be dangerous, and the howl he'd heard earlier still echoed in his mind. The alien woman motioned for him to follow her toward the forest edge. He hesitated for a moment. Going into unfamiliar territory with someone he just met felt risky, but staying out in the open felt worse. Gathering a few supplies from his ship, Tom walked beside her. She moved with quiet confidence, every step, balanced and ready. The forest swallowed them in shade, the faint light of the grass fading behind them. Tom didn't know where she was taking him, but for some reason, he felt safer than he had since landing on the moon. The encounter had been short, strange, and full of The forest was unlike anything Tom had seen before. The trees rose high into the sky, their trunks smooth and pale like bone. Their leaves shimmered faintly, catching even the smallest bit of light. The air was thick with a mixture of earthy scents and something sweet, like flowers blooming out of sight. The alien woman walked ahead, moving silently despite the thick undergrowth. She glanced over her shoulder often, checking if Tom was keeping up. He stayed close, watching her every movement. Her presence was steady, like she knew exactly where she was going. A soft rustle came from the right, and Tom froze. The woman reacted instantly. She raised her spear, stepping between Tom and the noise. Her sharp eyes scanned the darkness between the trees. The sound faded, but she did not lower her weapon until she was sure the danger had passed. Tom whispered, "What was that?" Even though he knew she probably could not understand him. She glanced at him briefly, then shook her head and kept walking. That single shake told him enough. It was nothing good. They soon reached a small clearing where a low fire burned inside a ring of flat stones. Several pieces of dried meat hung from a rack nearby. The woman gestured for Tom to sit beside the fire while she moved to the rack and took down some food. She offered him a piece, and though it smelled strange, he accepted. Hunger was stronger than hesitation. While they ate, Tom studied her. Her armor was worn but well kept. A belt at her waist held several small knives. Around her neck hung a string of teeth and claws, trophies from past hunts. She was clearly a warrior of skill. After the meal, she took out a long strip of leather and began repairing a tear in one of her gloves. Tom noticed her hands, strong, steady, but with a few scars. These were the hands of someone who had fought for survival more times than he could count. The peace of the clearing did not last long. A sudden, deep growl rolled through the forest, so low that Tom felt it in his chest. The woman was on her feet at once, spear in hand. She motioned for Tom to stay by the fire and then stepped toward the trees. The growl came again, closer now. Tom's pulse quickened. He remembered the howl from earlier, and now it sounded like whatever made it was hunting. Branches shifted in the shadows, and a massive creature stepped into view. It was at least twice the size of a human, with thick, scaled skin and 4 glowing eyes. Long tusks jutted from its mouth, and its claws dug deep into the earth with every step. Tom instinctively backed up, but the woman did not move away. She shifted her stance, lowering the spear point toward the beast. Her shoulders were relaxed, her breathing calm, but Tom could see the tension in her muscles. She was ready to strike. The beast let out another growl, the sound vibrating through the ground. Then it charged. Tom thought for sure the woman would dodge, but instead she moved forward. At the last moment, she spun to the side, the spear tip slicing across the beast's flank. It roared, swinging its massive head toward her, but she had already moved again, keeping just out of reach. Tom watched in shock as she danced around the creature, every step precise, every strike aimed at a weak spot. It was like watching someone fight who had done this 100 times before. The beast lunged at her, but she dropped to one knee and drove the spear upward into its chest. The impact made a dull thud, and the creature stumbled, letting out a final roar before collapsing to the ground. The woman stood over it for a moment, her breathing heavy but controlled. She pulled her spear free, wiped the blade on the creature's hide, and then looked at Tom. He realized his hands were shaking. "You saved me," he said, though he knew she could not understand. She gave him a short nod, then gestured for him to come closer. He hesitated, but she pointed firmly to the clearing. Only when he stepped toward her did she seem satisfied. The woman then crouched beside the beast, examining it. She removed one of its tusks, slipping it into a pouch on her belt. Tom guessed. It was another trophy. When they returned to the fire, she spoke a few words in her language, her tone calm but with a hint of warning. Though Tom could not follow her speech, he understood the meaning. This was dangerous territory. That night, she did not let him sleep far from her. She set a bedroll for him near her own and kept her spear within arm's reach. Several times Tom woke to find her sitting upright, watching the trees. He realized then that she was not just a chance encounter. She had chosen to stay near him, and she was making sure nothing happened to him. The thought left him with a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. Why was she protecting him? Was it because he was a stranger, or because she had some deeper reason? The next morning, sunlight filtered through the forest canopy, painting the ground with shifting patterns. Tom woke to the sound of quiet footsteps. The alien woman, Rava, as he would soon learn, was already moving about the camp. She checked. Her spear gathered some dried fruit from a pouch and handed him a portion without a word. Tom ate slowly, watching her work. She moved with the same silent focus she had shown the night before. Every movement had purpose. After breakfast, she motioned for him to follow. They walked through the forest, weaving between tall trees until the air grew fresher and brighter. Tom saw glimpses of open land ahead. Soon they stepped into a wide field filled with waist-high grass that swayed in the breeze. Tom breathed in the open air, relieved to see more sky. But as they moved across the field, he noticed something strange. Figures were watching from the far side, tall shapes, similar to Rava but dressed differently. 3 alien females stood together, their armor lighter, their hair tied in different styles. They carried weapons, too, though none as heavy as Rava's spear. Their eyes fixed on Tom the moment they saw him. Tom felt uneasy under their gaze. He slowed his steps, but Rava did not stop. She walked directly toward a patch of low bushes, searching for something. The other females began moving closer, their interest clear. When they reached speaking distance, one of them called out in a sharp, curious tone. Tom could not understand the words, but her eyes kept flicking between him and Rava. The tone of their voices reminded Tom of merchants arguing over valuable goods. He didn't like it. Rava's posture shifted. She stood straighter, one hand tightening on her spear. Her voice became firm, almost commanding. The other females glanced at each other, then back at Tom. One of them took a step forward as if to approach him, but Rava moved instantly, placing herself between Tom and the newcomer. She said something short and cold, and her hand hovered near her belt. Tom realized this was more than a casual meeting. Something in their culture was at play here, and he was right in the middle of it. The other females didn't back away right away, but Rava's stare didn't waver. After a tense pause, they gave small smirks and stepped back, though their eyes still lingered on Tom. Once they were far enough away, Rava turned to Tom. She looked at him for a long moment, then walked to a nearby tree. With quick hands, she scraped at the bark until a thick, golden sap began to drip out. The smell was sweet and strong, carrying on the wind. Tom watched with confusion as she dipped her fingers into the sap and then walked toward him. "What's that?" he asked, though he knew she probably didn't understand. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and began rubbing the sap onto his forearm. The scent was intense, clinging to his skin instantly. She spread it across his shoulder, her expression calm but focused. Tom stood still, unsure what to do. "Is this medicine?" he guessed. Rava shook her head. She tapped the spot where she had applied the sap, then gestured toward the distant figures of the other females. Her gaze hardened as she made the same gesture again. It clicked in Tom's mind. This was not about healing. This was a sign. He glanced down at his arm, now glistening faintly in the sunlight. "You're marking me?" he asked slowly. Rava gave a small nod, her eyes meeting his with a steady look. Tom's thoughts raced. In human terms, it felt like she was telling everyone else that he was under her protection. Judging from the way the others had watched him earlier, this was no small matter. When she finished, she stepped back, the faintest hint of satisfaction on her face. She pointed at him, then tapped her chest. Tom understood enough. He was hers. Now, at least in the eyes of her people. The strange thing was, he didn't feel angry about it. In fact, he felt safer than he had since arriving. If this was how her culture worked, then maybe this was the best way to avoid unwanted attention. They moved on, leaving the field behind and entering thicker forest again. Rava's pace was quick, her eyes alert. She led him to a stream where the water ran clear over smooth stones. She knelt to fill a leather pouch, then offered Tom a drink from her cupped hands. The sap's scent still clung to him, and Tom wondered how long it would last. If it was meant to warn others, it was working. No one had tried to approach since she applied it. By afternoon, they were back at camp. Rava set up a small rack near the fire and hung strips of meat to dry. Tom used his multi-tool to sharpen one of her smaller knives, earning a rare smile from her. That night, the forest was quiet. No distant growls, no movement in the shadows. Tom suspected that the scent on his skin was doing more than keeping curious females away. It might also be deterring predators. As he lay on his bedroll, he thought about how strange the last 2 days had been. He had come here by accident, stranded by a meteor storm. Now he was marked by an alien warrior as someone she claimed. It should have felt strange, even wrong, but it didn't. Instead, it felt like a shield, one he didn't know he needed until she gave it to him. He glanced at Rava, who sat across the fire, quietly repairing her armor. The firelight caught the edge of her spear, making it shine. Whatever this marking meant in her culture, Tom knew one thing. It was the first real sign that she intended to keep him safe, no matter what dangers this moon held. Morning light touched the treetops, casting warm gold across the clearing. Tom woke to the soft crackle of the fire. Rava was already awake, crouched near the flames as she checked a pot of boiling water. She moved with her usual quiet focus. But there was something different in her eyes when she glanced at him. Less guarded, more open. After breakfast, Rava picked up 2 short spears and handed one to him. Tom took it, feeling the smooth wooden shaft in his hands. She stepped into the open area of the clearing and made a gesture, showing him how to hold the weapon. "You want me to learn?" Tom asked. She nodded once, then demonstrated a quick thrust, stepping forward with precision. Her movements were sharp, yet controlled, the tip of the spear stopping just short of an invisible target. She repeated the move and then pointed to him. Tom tried to copy her stance. His first attempt was clumsy. Too much force, not enough balance. Rava stepped closer, adjusting his grip and shifting his feet. She tapped the back of his knee lightly, telling him to bend more. They practiced, for a long while. Each time he got it wrong, she corrected him without frustration. Tom found himself enjoying the training. It kept his mind off the uncertainty of his situation, and it felt good to learn something useful for survival here. When they finished, Rava set her spear aside and motioned for him to follow again. This time, she led him to a grove where the air was cool and filled with the scent of flowers. She knelt near a cluster of plants with wide, dark leaves and began cutting the stems carefully. She handed a few to Tom, saying a word he did not understand, but repeating it until he tried saying it too. They spent the next hour gathering plants and roots. Rava showed him how to avoid touching the ones with thin red vines, which she warned him about by tapping her chest and making a pained expression. It was clear those were poisonous. In return, Tom shared some of his own knowledge. Back at camp, he took a small tool from his pack and repaired the cracked edge of one of her cooking pots. The way her eyebrows rose and her mouth softened told him she was impressed. That night they sat by the fire, and Tom began telling her about his home. He pointed to the stars and explained where his planet was, tracing lines in the dirt to show the shape of his ship. She listened intently, her head tilted slightly, as if trying to understand every detail. When it was her turn, Rava spoke in her language, gesturing to the forest, the sky, and then to herself. From her tone, Tom guessed she was telling him about her tribe and the land they lived in. She pointed to the necklace of teeth she wore, touching one of the larger ones with a hint of pride. The more they spoke, the more they began to understand each other, not through words alone, but through tone, gestures, and the patient exchange of knowledge. Over the next few days, Tom noticed Rava's protective nature growing stronger. Whenever they moved through the forest, she stayed slightly ahead, scanning the area before he could take a step. If she heard an unusual sound, she raised her hand for silence. Sometimes she would step close enough that he could smell the faint trace of the golden sap she had marked him with before. Once, when a group of distant figures passed near their trail, Rava slowed and made sure Tom walked on the far side of her, hidden from their view. She didn't speak, but the meaning was clear. She didn't want them to notice him. One afternoon, while exploring near a rocky slope, Tom slipped on loose stones. He caught himself before falling too far, but Rava was beside him instantly, one hand gripping his arm. She gave him a stern look, then guided him to safer ground. It was the same kind of look he imagined a leader giving someone who had taken an unnecessary risk. Later that evening, Tom tried to thank her by cooking a simple meal from some of the plants they had gathered. Rava tasted it, raised her eyebrows, and gave a short nod of approval. That small reaction felt like a victory. The days began to fall into a rhythm, training in the morning, gathering food and supplies during the day, and sharing stories at night. Tom found himself relying on her presence, not just for protection, but for a sense of direction. He was starting to see her not only as a warrior, but as someone he could trust. Still, he couldn't ignore the question that stayed in the back of his mind. Why was she doing all of this for him? He was a stranger here, someone who might leave as soon as his ship was repaired, yet she treated him as if keeping him safe was her responsibility. That night, as the fire burned low, Tom glanced. Across at Rava, she was sitting on a flat stone, sharpening her spearhead. The glow from the flames reflected in her silver-toned skin, making her look like part of the night itself. He thought of the moment she had rubbed the golden sap onto his arm, claiming him in her way. It had seemed strange then, but now he understood it better. It wasn't just a warning to others, it was a promise that she would stand between him and whatever danger came their way. Tom lay down on his bedroll, listening to the forest sounds fade into the steady rhythm of Rava's movements as she worked. He realized that, for the first time since crashing on this moon, he wasn't counting the days until he could leave. The morning sun cast long shadows over the camp as Tom and Rava prepared for the day ahead. The air was crisp, and the forest around them was quiet except for the occasional bird call. Tom felt more confident now, moving with the rhythm of the forest. But deep inside, a quiet worry had begun to grow. Rava had not mentioned it, but Tom could sense tension when other females from the tribe came close to the camp. Their eyes lingered on him longer than usual. They whispered among themselves, casting glances in Tom's direction. Tom wondered if they were discussing him, or perhaps something else. Later that day, while gathering firewood near the edge of the forest, Tom saw one of the females approach. Her armor was different, lighter and more decorated, and her expression was sharp and confident. Tom remembered her name was Kira, though Rava had spoken it in her language. Kira's eyes locked onto Tom as she stepped closer. Tom felt the weight of her gaze, strong and challenging. Rava came up behind him and stood tall, placing a hand on Tom's shoulder as if to claim him silently. Kira smiled, but it was not friendly. "He does not belong to you," she said, her voice clear and firm in her language. Rava replied quickly, her tone just as strong, refusing to back down. Tom didn't understand their words, but he saw the meaning behind them. Kira wanted to take him for herself. Rava's body tensed, and she took a step forward, signaling that she would protect her. Claim. Kira raised her chin, daring her to stop her. The tribe gathered around as the two women prepared for a contest. It was clear to Tom this was no ordinary argument. It was a test to decide who would keep him safe. The challenge was explained through gestures and short commands. They would face a dangerous hunt together and see who could prove their strength, skill, and right to protect. Tom's heart raced. He felt like a prize, yet also a partner in something much bigger than himself. The next morning, the three of them, Tom, Rava, and Kira, entered the forest's deep heart. The sunlight barely reached the ground here. Tom could hear the crackling of dry leaves and the distant calls of strange creatures. Rava moved carefully, watching every shadow. Kira walked beside her, confident but serious. Suddenly, a loud roar broke the silence. From the darkness, a huge horned beast charged at them. Its thick skin was covered in rough scales, and its eyes glowed with anger. Rava quickly signaled to Tom. "Stay close," she said, her voice low but clear. Kira raised her weapon, ready to fight. The battle was about to begin. Rava attacked first, her spear striking the beast's leg. The creature stumbled, but did not fall. Kira followed with a swift strike to its side. Tom felt both women's energy and strength. They moved with skill and purpose, each trying to outdo the other while protecting him. When the beast lunged at Kira, she dodged but lost her footing. Tom rushed forward, using a branch to distract the creature. Rava took the chance to strike. A powerful blow to the beast's neck. The creature fell with a heavy thud. Silence returned to the forest. Rava and Kira looked at each other, breathing hard but proud. The tribe, watching from a safe distance, began to cheer. It was clear that Rava had won the challenge. Kira nodded respectfully to Rava and stepped back. Though she was disappointed, she accepted the tribe's decision. Tom felt a deep relief. The contest was more than a fight for him. It was a test of trust and loyalty. Rava turned to Tom and touched his arm gently. The golden scent mark she had placed on him before seemed stronger now. Tom knew then that their bond was real, forged in fire and challenge. As they returned to the camp, Tom looked at Rava with new understanding. She was not just his protector, she was his partner in a world far from home. The forest was still thick with shadows when Tom woke before dawn. The cool air smelled of wet earth and growing plants. Around the camp, quiet voices spoke in the tribe's language. Tom heard Rava's steady voice among them. Today was the day. The challenge had ended. But the tribe's decision was not yet complete. Rava had proven her strength, but now she had to show she could protect Tom from every danger this moon held. As the sun rose, casting pale light through the branches, the tribe gathered near the edge of the forest. The mood was tense but respectful. Everyone knew that what was coming would test more than just skill. It would test the bond between Rava and Tom. Rava stood tall, spear in hand, her eyes focused and calm. Tom stood beside her, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew he was. No longer just a visitor here, he was part of something new and strange. Suddenly, a low growl sounded from the forest's edge. Tom's heart quickened. Out stepped a massive beast, larger and more fearsome than the one from the earlier hunt. Its thick, dark scales glistened in the light, and its eyes burned like fire. The creature snarled and charged toward them. Rava stepped in front of Tom, raising her spear to block its path. Kira watched from the side, silent but ready. The fight began. The beast struck with powerful claws, smashing the ground and tearing at the trees. Rava moved with speed and grace, dodging its attacks and striking with precision. Tom helped as best as he could, throwing stones to distract the beast and shouting warnings to Rava. He was not a fighter, but he was learning fast. The battle was long and fierce. The beast's strength was overwhelming, but Rava's skill and determination were greater. She fought not only for herself, but for Tom's safety. At one moment, the beast caught Rava's spear and snapped it in two. Tom's breath caught in his throat, but Rava did not falter. With quick thinking, she grabbed a heavy branch and struck the beast's head. The creature stumbled, and Tom saw his chance. He ran forward, grabbed a sharp rock, and threw it with all his might. The rock hit the beast's eye, causing it to roar in pain. Rava took the moment to leap forward and deliver the final blow. Her new weapon sank deep into the beast's chest. The forest fell silent. The beast collapsed, defeated. The tribe erupted in cheers, and Rava turned to Tom with a tired but proud smile. She placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered words he could not understand, but the meaning was clear. Tom nodded, feeling a strong connection between them. He was no longer alone in this strange world. That night, the camp was filled with celebration. The tribe honored Rava's victory and her claim over Tom. The golden scent she had rubbed on him was more than a warning now. It was a symbol of their bond and the protection she promised. The night air was calm and cool. Stars twinkled far above, their light reaching through the leaves of the forest. Tom sat near the fire, watching the flames dance. The events of the past days weighed on his mind. His ship was finally repaired and ready to fly, but his heart felt heavy with a choice he had not expected to face. Rava moved silently beside him, her eyes reflecting the fire's glow. She said nothing, but her presence was strong and steady. Tom knew she was waiting for him to speak. He took a deep breath and looked at her. "I can leave now," he said quietly. "I can fly back to my home." Rava met his gaze without fear or anger. Her voice was soft but clear as she spoke in her language. Tom did not understand the words, but the meaning was easy to see. She was telling him he was free to go. But Tom shook his head. "I don't want to leave," he admitted. "Not yet." For the first time, a small smile touched Rava's lips. She reached out and took his hand gently. The golden scent she had placed on him was long gone, but the bond they shared was stronger than any mark on the skin. Tom felt warmth spread through him. This place, once strange and dangerous, now felt like a home. Days passed, and Tom stayed by Rava's side. He helped defend the camp and learned more about the forest and its secrets. Rava taught him how to read the signs of the land, how to move without making noise, and how to listen to the whispers of the trees. Together, they faced many small challenges: storms, wild animals, and rival tribes testing the borders. Each time, their trust in one another grew deeper. One afternoon, as they rested by the river, Tom spoke about his world again. He told Rava stories of cities filled with light and machines that flew in the sky. She listened carefully, her eyes wide, with wonder. In return, Rava shared the stories of her people, of their traditions, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. Tom realized that even though their worlds were different, they shared many dreams. The moon moved through its phases, and with each passing night, Tom felt more certain of his place here. He no longer thought of himself as a stranger or a visitor. 1. Evening, under the wide sky, Tom knelt beside Rava and spoke softly. "If I ever married someone, you would be my first choice." Rava's eyes shone bright. She took his hand and squeezed it gently. "I accept," she said in her language, her voice filled with quiet joy. They smiled, knowing their journey was only beginning. Together, they had crossed worlds, faced danger, and found trust. Tom looked at the stars above and knew that whatever the future held,